Recording in progress.
When I came to Chicago, it's probably the same now, but it was split into 2 seasons. So we had the spring season and the fall season, as you guys call it. But the spring season wasn't really spring; it was wet and cold and snow in March and stuff like that. And then it got too hot, and then we stopped, and then we came back in September. So I can see completely the logic and the attraction of having a kind of a 5G pitch or whatever, 3G or whatever it is, to be able to play rugby all year round, but especially to be able to, if the seasons are still split over there, to be able to play immediately, on an all-weather pitch. So.
Yeah, we're still split seasons, and global warming hasn't helped us out too much yet. So.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that's the quick background and just what we've been up to the last few years. But Paul, any other questions you may have? And if not, we could just jump into asking you some questions about your history at the Lions and kind of best moments. But
I was going to ask a question. I was reading recently about I don't know what you call it over there, but the professional league, the Super League. And in our day, obviously there wasn't that. And when you were playing for Chicago, you were playing at the highest level, let's say in the Midwest, and eventually in the national championship, etc. You might just connect for me how it's connected now between the professional league and Chicago Lions, or the likes of Chicago Lions.
Yeah. So what, the MLR, Major League Rugby's, been around, I think maybe 4 years now, I'm guessing 3 or 4 years. And the former president of the club side was involved in maybe the Lions being part of the original teams, but he really couldn't find any, within the Lions family, people interested in investing in it as an investment, because it probably wasn't going to make money for many years. And the original structure of being aligned with clubs is really evolved to now that you really need, I like to say, one big sugar daddy that doesn't mind losing money for a while, and then some other investors around that. And now a franchise costs about $10 million to have, plus you need about $15 million of working capital.
Yeah.
So when the MLR came about, there weren't many teams. I would say our level of rugby was about the same as that level of rugby. But now I'd really say Major League Rugby is the top tier of rugby in the US. And then for those that either can't make it, don't want to do it because of work and others. So we're technically the second level, or half a level below. Yeah. And there's still the national championship and all that structure, but there's an evolution going on here, and we'll see how that plays out. But now there's different, there's a D1 is what we're in now. Then our second side would be like a D2 division, and they could play for a championship as well. Where back in the day, excuse me, if you were on the second or third side, you couldn't play for anything.
It's just, I guess it's the same as Ireland. Back in our day, or when I was playing rugby for Ireland, I was playing for my club, Greystones, and I play a few matches for Leinster, my province. And then, if you were lucky enough, you got picked on the international team. Now the guys there's 4 provincial teams: Leinster, Munster, Ulster, Connacht, and those players never play for their club. So their club really now is the 4 provincial franchises, and therefore rugby below that is the amateur at various levels. So I guess that's what they have to do. That's what they've got to concentrate it in a smaller number of teams.
Yeah, and
don't players that get pulled up. We lost 4 or 5 players a couple of years ago or a year ago that will get pulled up by a professional team, and then they may or may not come back and play with us.
Yeah, that's true. We actually, one of our guys put together a list of who is playing who played for us that is currently playing in Major League Rugby. There's a whole squad of, I think, about 18 or 19 players that have played for us that are playing in Major League Rugby.
Yeah.
So, and their season now has grown. They pretty much start in the beginning of the year. I think they play through July, maybe August now.
Yeah.
So there are some that we would get some players that they would send them to us for the fall to get playing at a high level. For the guys that, they were on the cusp of making the team or needed more playing time, and they would play for us in the fall. Yeah. And now there's serious discussion of an organization in Chicago that is putting together a bid, or they have the right now to start an MLR team. They're assembling their financing and their team, and they have a window of time. So ideally, that would be great. They wouldn't be aligned with us. Maybe they would use our field to train, but it would allow players then not have to move away. And us and the Griffins would kind of be like, not the feeder teams, but kind of partner up and keep players more here in Chicago, versus we have some guys that moved to Houston that are not playing on the major MLR team, but are playing on like their step below that, which if it was in Chicago, they could have been playing for us or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And you can go back and forth.
Right.
Yeah. You can't do that over here. If you're you don't do it over here. If you're a young guy who was 18 or 19 and you come from one of the college teams and you go into the Leinster setup, you stay there. You don't really come back. And you don't. The problem is that if they don't make it professionally, many of the guys just don't come back and play it at an amateur level. But that's the way it is now. So
yeah, interesting. Okay, Allie, do you have some questions you want to ask? Or
I'm sure I could come up with hundreds of them, but I just want to first, but first, Paul, I just want to see how much time we do have of you today. Basically, just want to make sure we're using the time wisely.
I have plenty of time.
Oh, great. That's a dangerous thing to say to me, but no, I think the main thing, I'm not as familiar with you. Basically, it was I'm probably going to butcher his name, Richard Roach.
Richard Roach.
Yeah. Thank you. That had reached out as there was an article about you in what was it, like Independence, Ireland? Yeah. Yeah, and it was a pretty good highlight just of your background, career, and rugby experience. And I just love to kind of maybe focus in on just like on your Lions time, how you came over here a little bit more in depth than the article.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I ended up in Chicago kind of by accident, also, or certainly from a rugby point of view, by accident. I mean, I played rugby here in school, and I played at club level, and then I played at provincial level. And then for about 4 years, I was on the international team. This was in the amateur days, but it was the full international team, and everything was going on fine. And then I got an offer of a job in Chicago with the Irish Development Agency, which is it's a state agency responsible for bringing all of the American multinationals back to Ireland. So Google, and there was no Google at the time, but Apple, but there was a lot of, Apple was there at the time, but a lot of US manufacturing company. And they asked me whether I would be interested in, well, they didn't ask me actually, because they assumed because I was on the Irish international rugby team, I wouldn't be interested. But I heard that the job was there, and I went for the job and interviewed for the job. And they offered me the job to start in Chicago in, I think, April 1981. And this was around January when I was doing the interviews, and I went back to the Irish team and let them know that I wouldn't be available, after that season. And then I ended up arriving in Chicago, not knowing anything about the Chicago Lions. There was another team, Jim, Chicago something.
The Griffins.
Griffins, exactly. And not knowing anything about either team, not really interested maybe in playing rugby. I did play soccer and Gaelic football as well, and maybe I thought I'd keep fit there. And Then I got hauled in by Gary Larson, who I think, Jim, was captain of the team at that stage.
Yes,
And
in 81.
I spent 2 long walks in along the lake there with Gary, as he was convincing me that the best thing I could do was continue to play rugby. And so that was around April, May, and I turned up for the Chicago Lions in whatever it was, August, to start training for September. No intention of playing when I went over, but started playing at the start of that season, which I think was the start of the season where they had the Midwestern Championship as well, and fitted in and started to play and loved it, and great intro to Chicago, great interest to several guys who were really good footballers who were on the team at the time. And really had a good time, and delighted that I actually got the opportunity. And then I think within 6 months, I ended up playing for the Midwest of America against England, whom the same team that I played for Ireland the previous year against England. And we played England, the Midwest played England up in, I think it was Detroit, or somewhere in Ohio, maybe. And we got beat by about 40 points or whatever, as you would, by England, which had a full team. But I remembered it because it was the only try I ever scored against England was for the Midwest of America. So, and I stayed in Chicago with for 2 seasons, but if you look at the records, including Chicago Lions records, you'll see that I was captain for half a season because Dublin headquarters came back and said that we'd like you to move to California. So midway through the year, which was the summer of 1982, 1983. I moved to Los Angeles, and indeed learned from the lessons I had in Chicago. Immediately joined the local Santa Monica, Los Angeles Rugby Club based in Santa Monica, and played there for 2 years, and again played in the regional championship and played in the national championship. So Chicago was a great entree for me and my family into Chicago, and it just proves the idea that if you're playing sport, you can bring sport anywhere. And certainly I made a lot of friends there. I can still remember most of the team. Wilson and Lynch and Fedorenko and Paluzzi and Donlan and George Mostard, and who's the scrum half who was a really good South African? Harry Viljoen. And then the great Jim Carney was out half. And,
Jim, did you play him?
And then Gary Larson and a really good footballer, Roger Castino. And so really, it was a really good team actually, and we did well. We got knocked out, I think, by Old Blue in the semi-final of the national championship. But I really had great memories there. I have one story actually that might sound strange to you, but I'll tell it anyway. It was in relation to captaincy. I'd been captain of Leinster, and I'd been captain of Greystones Rugby Club, and for a couple of years. And you have to get elected. You have to get elected by the members, but usually it's in Ireland. It's all kind of sorted out. They decide who they want to be captain, and they just say, "Well, will you be captain?" And if you want to be captain, you say yes, and you're captain, etc. And I don't know whether you remember this, Jim, but in Chicago at that time, I think it was very American. It was very different because they said would you
Open
like to be
election.
captain? And I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind my captain. He said, well, you got great experience. You're an Irish international. I said, yeah, I'd like to be captain. And then there was a meeting, an annual general meeting, I think, in the Chicago Lions premises, that bar at the time. And somebody, I think it was you, Jim, said to me, by the way, this is a bit different over here. You're not captain. And I said, but I was asked to be captain. And they said, no. You have to go through an interview. And I said, with who? And he said, with the players. So I also said, is there anybody else going for captain? And they said, yeah, Gary Wilson, who was a really good prop forward from England. And extraordinarily, we were invited into this room with all of the players, and they asked us questions about how we would be captain. So this was extraordinarily different to what we're used to. We were all a bit taken aback by it, and we were asked about our leadership approach. It was probably before its time or after its time, depending on your view. But they asked me about my leadership and how I could combine playing and being captain and all that kind of stuff. And then both myself and Gary Wilson were asked to leave the room. And then they had the vote. And we were in this room aside waiting to see who would be named captain. And we were all kind of saying, because Wilson was from England and he'd gone through the same stuff as I had. So we're saying, this is all very strange. And then we were both brought back into the room, and it was announced that I had been narrowly elected as captain. So it was an extraordinary experience at the time. It was, I think I described it as kind of American amateur rugby at its best. So,
we still do that, by the way. We still kick people out of the room and do the questions. We meet at a bar, so that has continued on.
Well, yeah. So I'm glad you're still doing it. I give all of the new guys the hard time that I got anyway. So yeah, I really that's the thing I always remember in my mind, because I remember Gary Wilson saying, what are those guys? They're talking about us in there, and they're kind of talking about the pros and cons. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And then usually after the fact, go ahead, Jim.
I also wanted to say that Gary had been captain for about 5 or 6 years in a row, and then took a year or two off, and then wanted to come back. So Paul unseated him. The Irish mob in Chicago got the election through.
Vote early, vote often.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So Paul, what would you say is your, that's the great story. What's your greatest Lion memory as on the field and off the field?
On the field, I remember, and Jim might remember this, was we were playing in the semi-final of the regional championship. I think it was in Cincinnati. And we had this move where Jim was out half and he'd run across the field and he'd give me a scissors ball and I would try and go up the middle. And because I was a marked man at the time, and I don't even remember this, Jim, we called that move. And I said to Jim, don't give me the ball this time, right? Just keep on going. And I think it was only about 5 or 10 minutes from the end. And Jim came across the field to do the scissors, and I exploded up the middle of the field, and he dummied me, and everybody went for me because I was the international player in the center, and Jim ran all the way under the posts to score his try and win the match. So that's probably one of the better memories I have on the field. In terms of off the field, it's not so much an experience, but it's the respect I had for the commitment that Chicago had, and I guess all American amateur rugby players had at the time, which was extraordinary. I mean, we were in Ireland, still amateur in Ireland, but you had your clubhouse and you lived around the area, and most of your matches were in Dublin or in Limerick, and there might be, but you'd have 10 home games, and you'd have another 5 games with teams in Dublin, which is a 20-minute kind of car ride. But all of our games were hundreds of miles away. I don't know whether it's still the case, but we still had our home games. But I can remember really kind of every match was nearly a weekend away. Whether it was Detroit or Ohio or Kansas or Atlanta. It wasn't the same in California, by the way, because there was a lot of teams, around the Santa Monica, Los Angeles, San Diego area. But in the Midwest, there wasn't really much opposition for the Chicago Lions in Chicago itself. So every match, every away match was a 300-mile drive and a weekend away and an overnight in some grotty hotel and plenty of drinks after the match or even before the match. So that's the one. I'd come from a situation where rugby was easier because of the less journeys and more organization on, with pitches and stuff like that and grounds. So I think when people ask me about, and I was asked in that article about playing rugby in the States, was the players with it were as talented as any of the players that I had played with in Ireland, but they hadn't played as much as the players in Ireland because most of those players had played since they were 10 years of age. Most of the guys that I played in Chicago with were just really good athletes who had been playing rugby for, I don't know, Jim, 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, probably
15, not 15 or 20 years.
No, right.
So the talented guys like Castino and Larson and big guys like Fedorenko, etc. All of these guys would have been really good players at any level in Ireland as well. So I was really at the time delighted and surprised at the quality of the players. I mean, they wouldn't have, you might, in Ireland, if you bring a ball into a breakdown, you'd expect the ball to come back 90% of the time or 95% of the time. And maybe in Chicago that didn't, or in American rugby that didn't happen because of the technical, where you're placing the ball and stuff like that. That's stuff that you learn over 5 years in school and 5 years at club rugby. So the memories I have is really good players, really talented footballers, and really strong commitment. And then the bonus really was that the coach of the Chicago Lions was a guy called Kitch Christie, who went on, as you all guys know, went on to win a World Cup for South Africa. So he was one of the best coaches in the world. And I had come from international rugby. And if you come from international rugby in Ireland to Chicago, you think you're not going to learn an awful lot. But with the quality of the players, but with the knowledge of the coach and Kitch Christie in particular, it was a great experience. Mm-hmm. And then around 83, I think, he organized a trip for what they call the Team of the Americas, which was a selection of all of the best players in the United States to go to South Africa on a tour. And Kitch Christie organized that, where we played against South African teams and Irish teams and English teams, Gloucester and Bangor. And I was on that trip, I think I think Roger Costino was on it from the Lions, and then a lot of guys from California, and Kitch Christie had organized all of that trip. So yeah, huge commitment, great talent from the players, and really kind of world-class coaching. So I had great memories of Chicago, and plenty of funny stories, but just plenty of great experiences, Allie. So
now, Paul, you must have been there when they first bought in '81. I think they bought the clubhouse and did all that. And
that's right.
And then kind of as we were looking for, what Tyke and I were talking about needing kind of to bring a sense of community back to the Lions, because that had been gone, I think, since the middle of the 2000s, and kind of having our own field and our own, you know, kind of the glue to bring us all back together. What would you say is your favorite clubhouse story? If you got one.
That's acceptable, maybe, to hear. I don't know.
Yeah, I think my favorite clubhouse story, I think, was that captain's election. That was in the clubhouse, Jim.
Right.
Yes, it was on School Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where I was elected captain of the club after going through a rigorous, a painful interview. So yeah, that's my story about the schoolhouse. But I mean, it was great at the time that we had our own clubhouse, because I believe before that you just go to the local pub and stuff like that. So
Right.
And where do we play? We played our games in Lincoln Park, Jim. Is that
up at Foster Avenue.
Yeah. And I was over in Chicago 4 years ago, I think it was, when Ireland played the All Blacks. And
Great game.
Great game.
I met with Paluzzi and Dan Ham and John Kofod and Nick and Jim. And
yeah, I think that was going to be one of my questions, is basically, you know, we kind of talked about the past, but was curious, like, what current Lions relationships, you know, have you kept in touch with those people?
Well, I've kept in touch with Jim primarily, and I have contact with Nick Fedorenko, and I've had contact recently with Gary Larson, and I follow the website, and I get emails from guys, and I was talking to a guy recently about who's going to go over to Chicago, and I was telling him that you had to play for Chicago Lions. And I was in Richie Roach's pharmacy. Richie Roach has a pharmacy. His family have a pharmacy in my local town in Greystones. And every time I go past the pharmacy, it reminds me of Richie Roach and Chicago Lions, because it was when he went to Chicago, I put him in touch with Chicago Lions and with him and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, keep feeding us people, please. As always. Maybe, yeah.
I think also the ladies team, Allie, were only starting in 80.
Yeah, 2018 was when we started our 15s women's team, and apologies, I don't remember when we started our women's sevens team. So that has been more recent, though. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. A good experience all around for me, and it's great to talk to you guys.
No, I know. I'm really thanks again for jumping on a call so quickly too. But Jeff,
any parting words you want to say?
Well, I think to all of the members who are there, know that they're part of a great club, and people who've just joined, because I see you guys are, you know, on your website looking for players to join, etc. I couldn't recommend the Chicago Lions any more than you can. It's just I love the place, I love the people, I love the culture, and I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. So
thank you so much.
So.